מוכרים לי אנשים פה. טוב, האמת שזה, באמת אנחנו ככה במשפחה מצומצמת, אז רק שתדע לך יוסף שכל בכירי ישראל היום יושבים מאחוריך, קח את זה בחשבון. רק נציג ככה את יוסף אברמוביץ' שהוא בעצם חלוץ תחום האנרגיה הסולרית פה בארץ ובמזרח התיכון בכלל, מייסד ומנכ"ל ערבה פאוור לשעבר. היום הוא מנכ"ל חברת אנרגיה גלובל שמקימה שווקים סולריים במדינות בכל יבשת אפריקה. אפשר להגיד סמכות מובילה בתחום הפיתוח הכלכלי באמצעות אנרגיה, וטרי מאתמול חתן פרס עולים פורצי דרך שקיבל מנשיא המדינה. כן. והיה גם מועמד לפרס נובל, רצו להציג אותו למועמד לפרס נובל לשלום. בקיצור, איש אשכולות, אבל מעניין, שזה הכי חשוב בסיפור הזה, ועם כוונות טובות מאוד לעשות טוב בארץ, אז אני מזמין אותך לבמה.
אוקיי, ביקשו שאני אדבר באנגלית, כנראה זה כן חשוב להשפיע על היהדות ברחבי העולם, במיוחד בארצות הברית, אז אני אעבור ברשותכם לאנגלית. I'm really proud to be associated with this conference, and I'm really proud to be associated with Makor Rishon. It's, to me, the most interesting newspaper out there. I get all the major papers every Friday, and the first thing I do among all the papers is I go and look at Ariel's column on the back page, because he always challenges me, always makes me think. I'm always petrified when he writes about climate change, and I'll address that a little bit later. 15 years ago, we made Aliyah from Boston, Massachusetts, my wife and 5 children, to Kibbutz Keturah in the Arava. And with our partners and with the Moetza, and it's an important model for you guys here in Golan, we created a solar revolution that brought $400 million into the region, brought an additional $4 billion into Israel by creating the solar industry, thousands of places of green jobs, particularly in the periphery, and actually brought that region, the Eilat and Eilot, to be the first in the world to achieve 100% daytime solar goals. It'll probably be the first day and night. So my wife is from New Hampshire, and she likes the cold. And in a sense, bringing her to the Arava in August was a relatively cruel thing to do. If we would have had the foresight to actually come up here to the beautiful green Golan with its chills and more snow, then today perhaps the Makor Rishon conference would be in the neglected poor Arava, wanting to learn about the solar revolution that perhaps we would have unleashed here on the Golan. But history is what it is. And I think we're about to have, the Prime Minister signaled incredibly clearly, we're about to have a major historic shift to this part of the country. And again, we're proud to be part of it. I specialize in regional economic and social development for renewable energy. I've been working, after the Arava, been working in Africa. We're supplying 6% of Rwanda's power. We're a poor country. And we just finished now a solar field in Burundi, perhaps the 3rd poorest country on the planet. It supplies 10% of the country's power. Not a big field, but most of the people who we hired had never had a job before. They were subsistence farmers. They'd never had a paycheck before or health benefits. And so economic and social development and renewable energy go hand in hand. And I'm delighted to essentially come back to Israel and to the Golan. I consider myself Dati Leumi, a national religious citizen. But there's a catch. It's Dati Leumi Shivyoni. About the Zramir and the Yahadut. And it's also about that there should be full shivyon, full equality for all citizens of the State of Israel, but it also includes energy access, which we haven't done. We just finished Parashat Noach. Couldn't have had a more timely Torah portion to warn us about climate change, chaos, lawlessness, and the resulting loss of life from the rising seas. It's actually Parshat Noach during the sabbatical year, during Shnat Shemitah. And it's also 40 years since Birkat HaChama in 1981, when the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in 1981, says the world has to quickly get off of fossil fuels and go fast into solar energy. So in a sense, we have this spiritual and political alignment that may be unprecedented in the timing of this conference, and also right before the Prime Minister will lead the Israeli delegation to the UN Climate Conference is historic. And we have 6 weeks for a government meeting here in the Golan and a historic government decision that will address this. This week we're reading Lech Lecha. Inflection point. Where should we go? In what direction should we go? Not just physically. I mean, our family heard the spiritual homing signal, of Abraham, and we've been privileged to follow, in a sense, in those spiritual footsteps. But when it comes to the direction of this country, and when it comes to some of the strategic issues and the energy issues, we have a lot of work. Now, it's Lech Lecha me'aretzecha miladetecha mi'beit avicha, right? That we have to go from your birthplace, from your parents' house, to the land, this land that I will show you. And we're privileged to be part of a great nation, va'avarechecha, right? In Lech Lecha, it actually says that whoever blesses the people of Israel will be blessed by the God of Israel. Now, when I look at some of our blessings, I count 3 things. One is our land, which we're not utilizing well, particularly in the Golan, and I think the Prime Minister was very clear what he wants to see happen, and that would be unprecedented. The second blessing is our values, which I'm afraid to say we're about to betray some of them, which I'll go into. And the third is our technology. When I meet with African heads of state, they quote me the Genesis about that they want the blessings of the people of Israel and the God of Israel, not blessings they see as our technologies. And we're not yet using our technologies in the right way, and in particular in the Golan. And in effect, our way of life is in danger. I'd say that all the citizens of Israel, particularly the young people, are delighted that the Prime Minister is going to lead that delegation to Glasgow, to the UN Climate Conference. And I'm also glad that my new friend, Karina Harar, the Energy Minister, will be going and that she'll be here today. But the people around you, Mr. Prime Minister, and the people around you, Minister Karim, they are not telling you the truth. I'm going to tell you the truth right now. And I'm going to do it from the Bama of Makor Rishon, because I'm a religious nationalist, and this is the place. The climate crisis is a threat to our way of life, our food and water security, to our national security, and to our economy. The good news is that the Golan, if we do this right in the next 6 weeks, can be part of the solution. Now, being a person who's made Aliyah, I've recently revisited Herzl's second book, Old New Land. And what's amazing about this is sort of a different Makor, Rishon, right, of the Zionist movement, is that he describes, and think about the Golan, he describes a country. He wrote this 119 years ago. Next year is the 120th anniversary, which should be celebrated and revisited. He writes here about a country that is incredibly green, where there is no air pollution, there are no pkakim, there are no traffic jams, where all the chaklaut, all the agriculture is electric, where 100% of the transportation is electric. 119 years ago. or all the industry is electric, and we're 100% of the electricity of the future state that we're privileged to build and to inherit comes from green energy. Herzl. Im Tirtzu. There's so much here that we did fulfill, and there's so much here that we failed. Never before has Israel's national security been so threatened because of our energy policy security. It's not based on market forces. In other words, what we have done is we have reinforced monopolies, and we do not have an open and free market when it comes to energy, and certainly renewable energy. And this, I think, is our biggest strategic threat to our very existence. Iran and Nasrallah, chas v'chalila, but they can actually, I don't really want to say it out loud, they could actually win. Iran and Nasrallah can win, and we're playing directly into their hands. In the bunkers of Lebanon and Tehran, they're aiming their missiles today at our Achilles heel. I have to say the next line, and I can't imagine that it's actually coming out of my mouth, so I apologize in advance. And believe me, we're here for solutions, not just the crippling of the Jewish state, chas v'chalila, can happen on your watch, Mr. Prime Minister. And the crippling of our energy can happen on your watch, Minister Karim. With 150,000 medium-range missiles right over here, and with the long-range ballistic missile capabilities of Iran, our energy policy is completely blind. And what's our policy is to build more and larger gas-fired power plants that are combustible, that are near communities, that cannot be defended from our enemies because Iron Dome can easily be overwhelmed. And not only that, when they approved the gas rig, it was supposed to be 125 kilometers out to sea. So just in case, chas v'chalila, it would not affect the country in a meaningful way. Those people who are allegedly involved at this point with the submarine affair, are allegedly involved in the decision to have moved the gas rig to be within 10 kilometers of Zichron Yaakov. It was supposed to be out of the range of Nasrallah's Iranian-supplied missiles, and now it is all within range. 99% of our imports come through the sea. 75% of our drinking water is desalinated water. Chas v'chalila, but when that is hit, it may even be this government that's going to call for a commission of inquiry. How could we have let this happen, right? People will go to jail, political careers will be ruined, and there's going to be recommendations. And I'll tell you what those recommendations are. And maybe, if we take those recommendations now in a hopefully only hypothetical scenario, we can improve our national security and national energy security, and also make places like the Golan an example to the rest of the world. So the first thing that everyone's going to declare is energy transition to non-combustible, non-flammable power. The second thing is that our strategy is going to be a distributed energy plan. Have every house, like in California now, the new law, to be an energy generator. Have every community have its own power plants that are renewable and that aren't combustible. That's what you do in an age of daring terrorism and missiles. The other recommendation of the Vad Chakira is going to be that we need to have an open market where anybody can generate power, anybody can buy power, and they're going to determine the price between them, rather than almost Soviet style, where the central government is controlling everything and not allowing the market forces to work on our behalf, both economically as well as for our national security. And this one's especially for the Golan. Israel will then be the world leader, will be the decision of the Vad Chakira in agrivoltaics, in dual use of existing farmland to generate renewable energy. And when I just said to Gideon Sar on the way out, he declared that it's going to be a university, it should be the first university in the world that can give degrees in agrivoltaics, in dual-use land. And that way we may not even need the Minhal Karkei Yisrael and all the, you heard where the Prime Minister was going. Just give automatic use for that. There are two communities that have been neglected by past governments that involve this. And one is the Arabs of Israel, north, middle, south, and the other is the Golan. Now, there should be two hachatot memshalah. One is on what we call climate justice in the world, and that basically we would have all the sharot with the Bedouin, the mashal, right? If they knew that they would have agrovoltaic rights, that they could immediately continue their agriculture, but they could have a secondary revenue stream. It should be 5,000 megawatts would be enough to have, by mutual agreement. And spent a lot of time with Bedouin leaders. I developed the only Bedouin solar field. It's at Taravin. We proved the model for economic, social development, security, community involvement, and the Bedouin very much want this. And I have to say, Prime Minister's partner, Mansour Abbas, very much wants it. And so if we were able to give minorities who've been excluded from the renewable energy revolution priority interconnection, automatic dual use for agrovoltaics, that would go a long way. And the second is we want a government decision 6 weeks from now for 2,000 megawatts to come from the Golan on agrovoltaics. I know there's a big debate about wind. I think what's been approved has been approved, and let's take a 5-year break to kind of see what's been really the effect of tourism, because you don't want to undermine that, and certainly as well the birds. There are 4 million dunam of agricultural land in the state of Israel. We could be 100% solar day and night, 100% solar day and night, the first country, if 10% of the land immediately got dual-use agrivoltaic permission without Remi adding a new layer of taxes to everything. And we're going to save a lot of money. We, the consumers of Israel, we, the manufacturers of Israel, we're going to save a lot of money. Because the Prime Minister's office, this is going back to a different Prime Minister, did a Tuach Kakali. And what it is, they said, well, the price of gas is over here, and the price of solar at the time was over here. So let's compare apples to apples. They said, well, you know what, there's environmental costs. And they came up with, what does that cost, right? And so they added it over there. And then they said, well, there's a health cost, all that asthma and everything that we're all paying is cost over here. There's a national security cost. And it turns out, according to the Prime Minister's office, the true cost of gas to the meshek is between 45 and 60 agorot per kilowatt sha'ah. Solar energy, commercial scale, is coming in 15 agorot, give or take, about a third that, right? With storage is coming in about half that. Wind comes in at about a half that. Rooftop comes in close to that, but it's still cheaper. So our economic growth, as well as our energy security, would be helped very, very much by undertaking the strategy. And I'm delighted that the Prime Minister is very open to the idea that Israel should become a world center, and not just Israel, but that the Golan will be a world center of expertise and implementation in a very short period of time. How do you take an entire region of a country and bring in the agrovoltaics? So my friend Ariel Schnabel from Makor, he wrote 2-3 weeks ago, one of those columns that just gets me going. He says, look, you environmentalists, you're not going to win us over speaking about population growth, right? And to stop having kids. It's sort of I'm not going to do. I have 5 kids, so you know what side of the equation Abramowitz. He says, you have to speak to us about the things we care about. He didn't delineate them. So today we've spoken about national security and the urgency of it. We've talked about economics and to lowering the prices of just where, I don't know why everything's monopolies in this country and everything therefore is more expensive. We've spoken about the ability to regional development up in the Golan. And also I hope it's understood that equal development. If half the populations on the Golan are Drusim, and half the benefits, half the Ishurim, everything for the agrivoltaics, half the students in the university, they have to also come from the Druzi community. Now, Yamina had, I think, the smartest platform on the environment and on climate. Yamina. Because what they said was, we're setting a goal of, by 2030, of 50% renewables. 50% renewables by 2030. Im ze mishtalem. Those are the right words. If it's worthwhile. Is it worthwhile for you here in the Golan? Absolutely. Is it worthwhile for the consumer? Absolutely. Is it worthwhile to lessen our vulnerability to energy insecurity that these missiles represent? Ze mishtalem. Ze mamash mishtalem. And so I want to congratulate Makor Rishon for putting this on the agenda. What we did in the Arava, I think, is a warm-up of what can be done in the Golan. And when the Prime Minister does this and takes this message, because by the way, if we add the 5,000 megawatts of Israeli Arabs and 2,000 megawatts of the Golan, then the Yamina platform will come through. And it will be 50% renewable by 2030, which is what the US and the EU is committed to. And, going back to our values, Israel can finally be a renewable light unto the nations. Thank you very much. Shelot?
Your wife will enjoy the winter.
Yeah, my wife will enjoy the winters. Now, I've already accepted an invitation to come back, and I want to learn more. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, Makor Rishon. And what you saw are fields that we've built, but you've also seen examples of agrivoltaics, and that's really important. It's not rocket science; it's just a question of leadership, and I think the Prime Minister has just committed himself. So good luck in the Golan.
לשחרר, כמו שבאמת.
זה יהפוך לפרייז.
כן, טוב.